Good afternoon and welcome to the top of Old Baldy Lighthouse. My name is Travis Gilbert. I'm the Educator and Collections Coordinator for the Old Baldy Foundation, and I want to welcome you to the first of many videos tracking in real time the final months of Stede Bonnet. You see behind me, 302 years ago this week, the gentleman pirate entered the mouth of the Cape Fear River for the final time. Now, many of you know Stede Bonnet by that nickname, the Gentleman Pirate. Much of what we know about Stede Bonnet comes from a 1724 book entitled A General History of Pirates. That book was written by a Captain Charles Johnson, but most historians agree that Charles Johnson is a pseudonym for Nathaniel Mist. Nathaniel Mist was a newspaper publisher. He published London's Weekly Journal or Saturday Post, and his book, A General History of Pirates, was like an 18th century version of a tabloid. A General History of Pirates was used by Mist to romanticize New World piracy and to further his political beliefs. In A General History of Pirates, Mist tells us that Stede Bonnet was, quote, a gentleman of good reputation in the island of our Barbados, unquote. We learn through Mist that Stede Bonnet was a planter, that he received a liberal education, and that he was married. There's this idea in the public's imagination that Stede Bonnet became a pirate to escape a nagging wife, and it comes from A General History of Pirates. Mist writes that Bonnet's piracy was, quote, occasioned by some discomforts he found in a married state, unquote. Curiously, this story was added in the second printing of the General History of Pirates, so that's a clue that the story was added to sell more copies. So you must take this nagging wife story with a grain of salt, much like historians take most stories and facts in A General History of Pirates with a grain of salt. Historian David Moore uncovered records that show Bonnet borrowing some 1,700 pounds, which might suggest that Bonnet was suffering from financial hardships. Regardless, nonetheless, historians and the public's imagination fixate on this nagging wife theory. Now, another clue about Bonnet's motivations comes from the two names he gave his sloop, Revenge and Royal James. They're the same ship. Bonnet's just renamed the Revenge in order to disguise himself and his crew before entering the Cape Fear River 302 years ago. Both the Revenge and the Royal James suggest that Stede Bonnet was a Jacobite, or meaning that he was in favor of the House of Stuart's claim to the English throne. In 1701, England's Parliament passed the Act of Settlement, which banned Catholics from the English monarchy and set the stage for the crown to pass on to the House of Hanover, we know as a series of King Georges. After King George I gained the throne, a political faction was created within the English realm with the goal of restoring the House of Stuart to the English monarchy. This political faction became known as Jacobites, which comes from the Latin word for James. You see, if the House of Stuart were restored to the English throne, the crown would pass on to James Francis Edward Stuart, the son of the last King James, who was deposed as monarch during the Glorious Revolution of 1688. Now, Stede Bonnet named his sloop first Revenge and then later Royal James. He may have been pirating to rebel against the House of Hanover and King George I in favor of James Francis Edward Stuart. Other pirates, including Blackbeard, named their ships after other Stuart monarchs. Most famously, Blackbeard named his short-lived flagship Queen Anne's Revenge, after the final Stuart to sit on the English throne. Regardless of Stede Bonnet's motivation for becoming a pirate, he only spent a little over a year pirating before entering the Cape Fear River 302 years ago. And we don't believe this was Stede Bonnet's first visit to the Cape Fear River. A year prior, in the summer of 1717, Stede Bonnet needed to careen his ship. To careen a ship means to turn the ship over on its side, thus exposing its hull, and then removing the barnacles that attach themselves to the ship's hull and slowing the ship down. Now, when careening a ship, mariners seek a waterway with soft, sandy bottoms that is very tidal, and the Cape Fear River is perfect for careening a ship. Secondly, Barbadians like Stede Bonnet had a decades-long relationship with the Cape Fear River. In 1663, Barbadians commissioned explorer William Hilton Jr. to explore and chart the Cape Fear River. 1 year later, in 1664, Barbadians attempted to permanently settle the Cape Fear River by establishing the original Charlestown, located at the confluence of Town Creek and the Cape Fear River in Brunswick County. After careening his ship, likely in the Cape Fear River, Bonnet engaged a Spanish man-of-war off the coast of Florida. The battle did not end in Stede Bonnet's favor, and the gentleman pirate who was wounded in the battle sought a friendly harbor to recoup his losses. That friendly harbor ended up being New Providence in the Bahamas. It was in the Bahamas that Stede Bonnet met the notorious Blackbeard. And from the autumn of 1717 through June of 1718, Blackbeard and Bonnet were never far from one another. Bonnet witnessed most of Blackbeard's historic moments, from the capture of the French slaver La Concorde and its rechristening as the Queen Anne's Revenge, to Blackbeard's successful blockade of Charlestown, South Carolina, all over a chest of venison. After leaving Charlestown, Blackbeard attempted to enter Old Topsail Inlet, known today as Beaufort Inlet. On June 10, 1718, when the Queen Anne's Revenge attempted to enter the harbor, the ship ran hard aground on a sandbar. With the Queen Anne's Revenge aground, Stede Bonnet left Blackbeard and traveled the inland waters to Bath, North Carolina, where the proprietary governor Charles Eden was in residence. Bonnet successfully petitioned Governor Eden for a pardon, and when Bonnet returned to Old Topsail Inlet, pardon in hand, Blackbeard was nowhere to be found. It was then that Bonnet realized Blackbeard didn't accidentally run the Queen Anne's Revenge aground on a sandbar, but Blackbeard did it on purpose, to be rid of himself, of Stede Bonnet, and well over 100 other pirates. Once Bonnet left for Bath, Blackbeard took off with most of the accumulated loot. Now Bonnet sought some revenge. Disregarding his days-old pardon, Bonnet returned to his old ways of being a pirate. He renamed his ship the Royal James and terrorized the mouth of the Chesapeake and Delaware Bays in the summer of 1718. When Bonnet set sail for the Cape Fear River, he took along 2 captured sloops, the Fortune and the Francis. After entering the mouth of the Cape Fear River 302 years ago this week, Bonnet would once again careen his ship, not knowing the fate that laid in store. Continue to watch our Facebook page as we continue to track in real time the saga of the Gentleman Pirate. We'll see you next time, folks. Thanks for joining in.